providing insight and resources for your spiritual journey. Unity Online Radio.
We are pleased to bring you this special series on Unity Online Radio. To learn about other series, go to unityonlineradio.org and click on Special Series.
Welcome to a special series, The Three Faces of God, with co-hosts Karen Kelly and Reverend Ellen Davenport, author of The Five Principles. They'll be exploring the different aspects of the divine that show up in world religions and in unity. No matter what you think about God now, stay tuned for new ideas on The Three Faces of God.
Hello. Welcome to show number 5 of the Three Faces of God series. I'm Ellen Davenport. I'm here with my co-host, Karen Kelly.
Hello, Ellen.
And our special guest, Mark Hicks. Mark, are you still at Lake Tahoe?
I am.
Oh, you're so smart to get out of Texas in the summer.
Well, I'm enjoying it, and this is a good time up here.
Good. So we've been talking about the Three Faces of God. It's an idea that comes from Ken Wilber, but it has helped us sort out the different ways we approach God. If you listeners have missed earlier shows, they are available here on Unity FM in the archives under Special Series. But just to recap, the first face of God is God within. The second is God in relationship. And the third is God is all that is. It sounds really simple. But human beings have been arguing about it for centuries.
They sure have. And, none of them have seemed to find a way to incorporate all three. Ellen, they usually pick one or two, and then they end up judging the others. So, listeners, on this show, we're not trying to suggest that there's a correct way to consider and experience God. We've been really exploring all three faces that Wilber introduced us to because we know that engaging in practices that help us realize all the faces can add a richness to anyone's spirituality in our lives.
So today we want to look at the three faces, specifically from a Unity point of view. For, Unity's founders and early writers, how did they see it? How did they talk about it? Not all of our listeners are in Unity churches by any means, but we figure you are at least aligned with New Thought teachings, and we thought it would be interesting to talk about what those teachings are and whether or how Unity's founders saw the three faces of God. But I'd like to start by telling our listeners more about our guest, Mark Hicks, because the work he's doing is so interesting. Mark is a licensed Unity teacher. He's based at Unity Church of the Hills in Austin, which is about an hour away from me. He teaches classes. He even started a new church a few years ago in Georgetown, Texas, and it is still going strong, even though Mark is back in Austin. But his greatest presence is online. He has a website called truthunity.net that focuses on the lessons taught by Unity's founders. It is so rich with resources. We could probably do a show in itself just about truthunity.net. And I would urge all of our listeners to spend some time there. There's always new stuff coming onto it. Mark, this website is a real labor of love. And I don't think I've ever heard you talk about how this got started and why you were interested in doing it.
Well, it grew, as all good things do. It started small. And I was in my licensed teacher training up at the Village and encountered some audio tapes in the library that were 20 and 30 years old. I began listening to them, and they were very impactful to me. So I simply started streaming them on the internet. And then two things happened. First of all, I'm a software engineer by background, and somewhere it occurred to me that the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary could be hyperlinked to the original Bible that the Fillmores used, the American Standard Bible. And I hyperlinked it, and a lot of people responded to that. Some people because they saw insights to doing metaphysical Bible study that they hadn't done before, and others simply because they didn't have to carry around that great big book anymore.
Yeah, and let me just interject. Metaphysical Bible Dictionary is Charles Fillmore's tome with metaphysical meanings of the names of every person, place, or thing in the Bible. Mm-hmm. And you can go on Mark's website now and just look it up. So you can put in, just go look up Samson and click on it, and it goes straight to whatever Fillmore said about it. It saves so much time.
And, Truth Unity is such a wonderful resource for anyone interested in learning more about Unity's teachings. And it is so easy to use, too. I wanted to point that out. I've just had a great time on it. So, Mark, I wondered if you would describe the kinds of writings and recordings and the digital books that our listeners can find on your site.
Well, it's a lot of original stuff, and that some of it goes back to the 1926 silent video of Unity, which is segmented. There's a lot of audio from some of the founders, what I call the founding teachers, Martha Smock, May Rowland, Ernest Wilson, Eric Butterworth, as well as some short clips by Charles and Myrtle themselves. And then there's quite a few recordings from teachers that were a little bit later. They weren't founders, but people like Frank and Martha Judici, just various people that have taught. Some of them are contemporary teachers. And so I put the information out there. The second thing that happened is Truth Unity ceased to become a website for me, and it began to be a discipleship program. In other words, it was something that impacted myself personally, just doing it. And others responded in the same way. And so today, I simply state that Truth Unity is a discipleship program. It can attract people, it can help them, but it can't take you to the next level. That's where we need teachers, ministers, churches. So it's an introduction to Unity.
It's just fascinating, and Mark also sends out emails when he adds something new to it. So you could spend hours there, not only reading the digital version of so many Unity books, but listening to these teachers. Frank and Martha Judici in particular, I've heard, as long as I've been in Unity, about how wonderful and brilliant they were and how much the previous generation of ministers learned from them. And so I can go listen to them. Go listen to Eric Butterworth. And Mark, I think you've put a lot of those clips on Tom Thorpe's show about Eric Butterworth, too.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I do is I segment all the audio and the video. So you don't have to listen to an hour program. You can listen to 3 minutes and then jump to another clip as necessary.
And I love that.
Yeah, that takes old material and brings it into new life for the internet.
Where do you get the time or the money to do this?
It is a labor of love as well, but it's part of my own personal learning experience. It's important to me.
Well, and it must keep you grounded in the teachings, the original Unity teachings.
Yes.
What the founders were saying. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I hope we get into that, because I do believe that the founders spoke all three faces of God. They used traditional language, and they used traditional theology for certain. Mind idea expression can appear to be a theological statement, but it was alive for the Fillmores. When they talked about mind and idea and expression, they weren't talking theological concepts. They were talking something that was very dear to them and reached them at a heartfelt level.
Well, Mark has actually brought up some recordings today for us to hear. And listeners, you can tell by now that Mark knows more than most of us about Unity's founders and what they were saying. And that's why we wanted him on the show today, is to talk about how the founders saw God within the context of the three faces of God. Mark, I know you're not a Ken Wilber fan, but you don't have to be to talk about the three faces, because we talk about them in unity, just not with that name. God within, God in relationship, and God as all that is. And I agree, Unity's founders used all of them. Mm-hmm. But as I read the Fillmores and Emily Cady and Lessons in Truth and some of the others, it is easy to get confused. And I remember in Lessons in Truth in particular, there's a part where Emily Cady writes at length about God as principle. And then she seems to feel obligated to add, oh, but God is personal too. Myrtle Fillmore referred to God as Father without hesitation. So the unity principles they taught say God is all there is and God is within us. And at the same time, they seem to be praying to a God in the sky sometimes. So can you help us sort that out?
Well, I hope so. I'm not sure, but I hope so. I think the important thing is that truth transcends unity. Truth transcends integral spirituality. Truth is universal. And so we do use these terms, but as long as we hold to an understanding that truth is something beyond language and beyond our capacity as humans to fully grasp, then I think we're fine. But you're right, it does start with principle. Emily Cady starts off with principle. I remember giving a talk in Georgetown, Texas once, and a congregant was having a real rough time with that. And as soon as she understood that when we go into the silence, principle leads us to presence. As soon as she got that, then she understood that God is personal as well, something that we can relate to, and we do relate to. And so it's a process. It begins with a principle, slowly goes to a presence when we do what Emily Cady tells us to do, and that's to hibernate in the secret place most high, to go there and just simply rest. And a presence will emerge. And this was May Rowland's great statement to us, is that God is a presence. And there we have the second face of God. Those of us who have relationships, romantic relationships, will often hear, well, you're not present, quote, unquote, present. Presence indicates a relationship. It is something that is required of a relationship. And when May Rowland talks about presence, she's talking about us.
And May Rowland was the director of Silent Unity for, 55 years?
Yes. She
started there right out of high school and just spent her entire life there. Mm-hmm. There's a great story about May Rowland going, Unity Village is in Kansas City. She went outside one day and told a tornado to turn away from Unity Village. And it did, the story goes.
Absolutely.
So let's back up a little bit and talk about, what do you mean when you say God is principle?
Well, in the third face of God, we're speaking of something that we don't necessarily relate to. We're talking about God as allness, of fullness. It's the theological speak of omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence. But fundamentally, it's easy to think of, if you think of Charles Darwin trying to uncover the mystery of life. And at one point, Charles Darwin hit upon this idea of natural selection. That is a principle. That is something that occurs regardless of whether we wish to participate or not. It is the allness of life, or at least how he explained the allness of biology. And so there are some principles that exist in a transcendent sense that do not require our participation, that are bigger than us, that incorporate us. They are the ocean. We are drops in that ocean. But they are something that appears to humans to be very cold, uncomforting, unforgiving. But when we accept them and we bring them into our awareness, as Charles Darwin was brave enough to see the grand diversity of life as a result of principle. We can also look at our spiritual life, our individual life, our collective life, as something that somehow originates with principle. Does that help?
Yeah, I wrote a book about principle, and they are the laws that govern the universe, govern the way we live. They're like gravity; they just are, and we are all affected by them. One of the recordings you had, Mark, Vera Dawson Tate, talks about exactly this. She starts out reading from Emily Cady's Lessons in Truth, that passage that talks about God as principle, but then says, oh, God is personal too. And she explained it really well. Jeff, if we have that recording, Mark, who is Vera Dawson Tate?
Well, she's affectionately known as Mrs. Lessons in Truth. She was the teacher of the correspondence course from roughly 1950 until its end in 1973. She could quote any Unity writing paragraph by paragraph from heart, but she knew Lessons in Truth better than anything else.
Okay, this clip is almost 5 minutes, but it's worth listening to the whole thing. And then we will take a break after that and be back with the three faces. Jeff?
Now let us go on to question 9, or the fourth one in this particular part of our cassette tape. Explain God as principle. That's the first part. Explain God as personal, loving Father. Whether you believe it or not, this is going to be a question, and I hope the answer is going to have great meaning in your life if it has not done so already. God as principle is impersonal, general, universal. Let me read from the chapter. Many have thought of God as a personal being. The statement that God is principle chills them, and in terror they cry out, "They have taken away my Lord, and I know not where they have laid him." Broader and more learned minds are always cramped by the thought of God as person, for personality limits to place and time. Now listen to this, because it is very important. God is the name we give to that unchangeable, inexorable principle at the source of all existence. If God is impersonal, general, universal, then we have something upon which to build a certainty that he will not change. Referring again to the book, the statement that God is principle chills them. You see, thinking of God only in this way seems to put him so far apart from us. And yet all the time what we're seeking for is a sense of oneness, a sense of unity. We find that any principle, the principle of music, the principle of baking, the principle of engineering, is impersonal, general, and universal. But notice this. The moment any principle starts to work through some agency, it becomes to that agency personal, specific, and individual. So it should not be hard for us to realize that God is first of all impersonal principle, but above all, he is personal, loving Father. If he were only principle, then the sense of prayer would have little meaning. But if he were only personal, loving Father, there might be times when we would wonder if he could change. But knowing him to be personal, loving Father, and at the same time impersonal principle, gives us a foundation upon which to move. If you should find this question of principle and personal loving Father a little difficult to grasp, think of any musical instrument. The principle of music has to be general, impersonal, and universal. But when some individual takes that instrument and brings forth harmony, then could we not say that music has become personal to that particular individual or to the ones that listen to it? It makes no difference what we begin to consider in the outer world. We will find back of each principle some agency that will bring that principle out into something that is much more general and personal to the individual. Even little things like cooking and baking, they become personal. And yet there is definitely a principle back of each. Anybody that has refused to follow a recipe, not knowing the recipe, will know this. Of course, there are those very good cooks, of course, that have the principle established so definitely in their minds that they don't seem to need a recipe to look at. But there are many others who need to follow a certain blueprint. A principle, remember always, is the starter of some action or activity. And when that action or activity moves through some agent or agency, then it has to be personal and very, very specific to that particular instrument or individual.
You're listening to Unity Online Radio. This programming is made possible through the generous love offerings of listeners like you. If you feel spiritually fed by this programming, we invite you to contribute. Go to www.unity.fm and click on Donate Now.
Hi, this is Ellen Davenport. The 5 Principles was my first book, and here's what I've learned as an author. It's nice to sell a lot of books, but it's truly gratifying to know the book is being read, used, and studied in churches and small groups in the U.S. and beyond. And I get a real kick out of hearing that someone gave the 5 Principles to friends who aren't in Unity. Because the 5 Principles are universal spiritual laws. They operate in everyone's life, whether they know it or not. They've been discovered and rediscovered by spiritual masters for thousands of years. God is all there is. We are expressions of God. We create our experience with the power of our thoughts. We align ourselves with the well-being of the universe through prayer and meditation. And we live the truth we know every day in every decision. Just 5 Principles. They cover it all. Buy the book at unity.org.
You're listening to The 3 Faces of God, a special series with co-hosts Karen Kelly and Reverend Ellen Davenport. Join the discussion on Facebook and submit questions for upcoming shows. Now, back to The 3 Faces of God.
We are back. I'm Ellen Davenport, and that audio clip we were playing as we went to break was Vera Dawson Tate, who's one of the legendary Unity teachers of the mid-20th century. And she was talking about God as principle and God being personal. And when I heard her explain it, I got it. I think God becomes personal when we use the principle. So the principle is a blueprint, and we make it personal and specific by acting on it. So, Mark, are we saying that God as principle is the third face, the web of life, and God as presence is the second face?
It certainly seems that way to me. And that's my experience, my spiritual experience as well.
Yeah.
That brings Unity's metaphysical construct, which is mind, idea, and expression, out of theological speak and into a spiritual reality.
Mm-hmm. Karen, thoughts?
Well, I totally like that clip, and I liked what Mark just had to say and what you had to say. And what crosses my mind as we're talking here is the thing that I've been kind of focused on the entire time along in these shows is that there's a difference between our intellectual understanding of the principle and the third face, the second face, and the first face from an academic or an intellectual standpoint. And then there's the experience of the awareness of it actually becoming real in our lives.
Right.
And so that's kind of always the thing that's on the back burner for me. But I really, this is great information, great stuff.
Well, yeah, so wait till you hear this next clip, because I think what's tricky about the second face is having a relationship with something that we're saying is not really a being, not the old man in the sky. We say in Unity all the time that God is not in the sky, God is not a supreme being intervening in our lives. And Mark, you brought a clip from May Rowland that addresses exactly this. It's really short. But she was being interviewed by Ernest Wilson, another one of the legendary Unity ministers, and he asked her about her personal relationship with God. She was the director of Silent Unity. So, Jeff, would you play that? It's really short.
May, tell me, how do you personally look at God? What's wrong?
Well, I look at God as a presence, something I can feel, not as a being, but as a presence that you feel. And as you sit quietly and think about the presence and power of God, well, what is God? God is light, God is substance, God is intelligence, God is love, and you think of those qualities of God's mind. But I think the one that we think of the most probably is God as light. And Jesus said, I am the light of the world, and ye are the light of the world. Well, when we think of God as light, pardon me, we start energies going in our mind that are healing to us. We release energies, the energy of this light into the body, and this is healing, brings about healing.
So, Mark, what's she saying there? She has a personal relationship with light?
I think she's saying that she has a personal relationship with what she finds in the silence. When she talks about presence, she does not try to define what she's going to encounter. She simply goes into the silence, and what emerges, she accepts. In previous broadcasts, there was mention about devotion, and there was a mention of a beloved, and there was a mention of giving to that. May simply gives to the presence that emerges. She allows God to reveal him or herself.
Mark, we talked the other day, and you were saying that the language used by the founders does not necessarily tell us what their experience was. Were they just using the language of the day so they could meet people where they are?
I think they used the best language they had. I don't think they were caught up by language. I think that one thing to realize is they saw themselves as a sect of the Christian church. They had no trouble using church language. They simply interpreted it a different way. And to the extent that we also are comfortable with traditional Christian language, then we have no trouble with it either.
I think it's
and Unity's full of people. I'm sorry, Karen, go ahead.
That's okay. No, I think it's useful to remember that language is inadequate to embrace the entirety of what we experience in the realm of the divine, whether it's the experience that we have from within ourselves, that we can almost bubble over, we're almost spilling over with love or giving or attention or whatever as the first phase. And it's hard to have language that describes what we feel deep in the silence or what we feel when we're in a relationship with the beloved, the divine, in a second person relationship. Our language is really inadequate. It can just sort of point to the experience rather than really describe it, I think.
And when I read Charles Fillmore, I can see him kind of flailing to describe what he's trying to talk about. And of course, everyone I know who's had a deep experience of the divine says there are just no words. Right. Mark?
Yeah, and it does require practice. This is not theology, but it is spiritual practice. And to the extent that we work it, it works. Right. To the extent that we talk about it, it doesn't work. And that's what our problem is, right?
Absolutely. I agree with you 1,000%. I said
So,
we've got to have the experience. So.
And if I could make a plug then for Truth Unity, which is filled with traditional language, and I understand that it's not for everyone. My point is hang in there, practice it a little bit, and I think the discovery will be that the language is no longer a hurdle.
Yeah, you get used to it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've talked about the third face of God as principle, the second face as presence, and the first face, Mark, you brought a little clip from Rosemary Fillmore Ray. She's a granddaughter of the Fillmores, but she's reading from Healing Letters, which is Myrtle's collection of letters, and this is about the first face of God. So, Jeff, would you play that for us?
God is the one perfect life flowing through us. God is the one pure substance out of which our organism is formed. God is the power that gives us motive power, the strength that holds us upright and allows us to exercise our members. The wisdom gives us intelligence in every cell of our organism, every thought of our mind. God is the only reality of us. All else is but a shadow that is cast by some foolish belief or unwise combination of thoughts and the elements of being. When we let light flood us with its sunshine, all clouds vanish, and we begin to see ourselves in new ways of doing, which lead to wholeness and health and real satisfaction and growth. The free flow of God's life through us becomes hindered in its expression if our thoughts and acts imply a belief in a limited number of years, in a hoarding of strength or substance or supply. We must prove here and now for ourselves our faith in God as omnipresent good and eternal life. God in the midst of us is a great steady stream of renewing and cleansing and vitalizing life. And we can have the use of this life if we will open up the channels of its flowing and ourselves draw from this source.
Boy, Rosemary has that broadcast voice, doesn't she? She was on the radio for a long time. But I'm really touched by that reading from Healing Letters because Myrtle was the one who used this to heal her own body. She was not expected to live when she was 40. And ended up living to her 80s. And I guess she was working a lot with the life force as the first face of God, the divine within. Is that what you all hear too?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I do as well. I see that passage as being Myrtle as God in expression, being made new each moment, God expressing moment by moment through her health and fullness of life.
Okay. So I think we've shown examples of how Unity's founders used all three faces. God is all that is, God in relationship, and God within, even within their traditional language. And they, I think, Mark, is this true? They were more specifically Christian than Unity is today?
Oh, I'm not sure I want to go there. There are many Unity is a diverse movement, and certainly we have people that are just as rooted in traditional Christianity as were the Fillmores, and then we have others that have a broader spirituality. But
so, Karen, anything else
available.
Before?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Before we let Mark go.
Oh. Nope. I think this has been really useful, and the most important thing of all is that our listeners know that TruthUnity.net is just a breathtaking resource. And treat yourself. If you weren't familiar with it, treat yourself and spend some time on there. And I tell you, Mark, you've organized it in such a way it makes it so easy to get around in and really find valuable information. I tell you, I bet you seriously I've spent 8 hours on it. It's just so amazingly worthwhile. So if you don't get one other thing out of our show today, know to go there.
Mm-hmm. TruthUnity.net. I end up going there when I'm working on Sunday Talks because it's so quick to look something up. And I love it that you have everything broken into tracks so I can, and labeled with what they're about so I can listen to just what I want. It really is a labor of love, and I would guess you're accepting donations for it too.
Of course. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Mark, thanks for being with us. We're going to take another quick break, and we'll be back with the mailbag, all of the questions and comments you all have been sending us during this series.
Hello, listeners. Did you know we've gone mobile? That's right. Your favorite Unity online radio programs are available on your mobile device. Now you can take us with you wherever you go. Using apps from Live 365 or Stitcher, you can listen to Unity online radio live or on demand. To learn more, visit www.unity.fm and click on mobile listening.
What if you were intentional about your life, committed to having more energy and being more vibrant? Join Reverend Temple Hayes, spiritual leader of First Unity at Unity Campus in St. Petersburg, Florida, as she guides you on a journey to an intentional and energetic life. Empower your life and fully express the wondrous energy, love, and joy you hold in your wildest imagining. Joyfully and actively know that more important than what happens after you die is the deeper and enriching concern for what happens while you're living. How can you experience an incredible life right now? Learn how each week on The Intentional Spirit, Seeing and Being, Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Central Time, right here on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
You're tuned in to the Three Faces of God. Here are your hosts, Karen Kelly and Ellen Davenport.
Hello, this is Karen, and I and Ellen are back with the Three Faces of God, and I just got a little bit discombobulated there. Before we get to our mailbag, which are the questions and comments that you've been sending to us on Facebook and to our email, I just wanted to tell you briefly about our upcoming show next Monday. It is one not to miss. Our guest is Dustin DiPerna. He is a student of integral theory and studies under the direct mentorship of Ken Wilber, whom we've been hearing a lot about, who introduced us to the Three Faces of God. Dustin has just finished 1,200 pages of writing that will be in two books, coming out in two books, talking about spirituality, world religions, and the Three Faces of God in integral theory. And he created the foundation for integral religion and spirituality. He will be talking to us about how some of the most great world religions have looked at the Three Faces of God. So it is a very, very exciting topic. You don't want to miss it. That will be our very last show.
Yeah,
you can believe that.
Dustin's credentials make him sound like a pointy-headed academic, which he may be, but he is also adorable and personable and was so much fun to talk to.
Yes.
So that'll be our last show next Monday.
Yes. And we had an opportunity we had to pre-record it because he's in Switzerland, and you'll hear about that. It was
so we can guarantee it's a good show.
It's
We've already done it.
Okay, so let's turn, Ellen, to our mailbag and take a look at some of our questions and comments. And I'll read the first two are just great. Joe Lou writes, "Hey, what a great series. You know, I had to listen to show number 1 a couple of times to grasp everything that you talked about. And I loved Reverend Paul Smith in show number 2. And then she says, this show is helping me pull a string through much of what I've read over the years."
Mm-hmm.
And Karen B. writes, "I love that I learned that one of the key milestones of spiritual progress is kindness and compassion." Well, we really appreciate your enthusiasm and support, don't we, Ellen?
Yeah.
And Joe Lou, we're also very happy to hear that the show is helping you bring some of the ideas you've learned about through the years together.
Yeah, I loved Paul Smith, too. That was show number 2. He started out as a Baptist minister and went so far off the reservation that they kicked him out of the Baptist organization. And he's one of us. He is a friend of Unity and has written a book that includes a lot about the 3 faces within Christianity and how Jesus practiced all 3 faces.
Yep, and he says he's got a famous 9-word sentence that goes like this: Jesus spoke about God, to God, and as God. And his book goes in great detail about why he envisions it that way and the truth that Jesus taught us. So it's very, very exciting.
And have we said the name of the book? It's Integral Christianity.
Yes,
by
Integral.
Paul Smith.
Right, The Spirit's Call to Evolve. You can get it on Amazon. You can download it on Kindle. It's great. So, okay, let's pull another one out of more letters. So Sarah writes, "I'm not sure I know what to do with that second personal, intimate face of God without stepping on the others. I've worked so hard to not pray to God, as Unity teaches there is no God outside ourselves. So when I talk to God in an intimate relationship, what am I supposed to talk about?" And Mindy writes,
Great question.
It's a great question. And Mindy writes, "I think that there are times for all 3 faces. There are times when life throws me a punch, and I'm grateful to have a God that I can reach out to. I view these 3 faces as spiritual tools instead of fodder for judgment of others. And when we use them that way, we can deepen our awareness with oneness and all that is." What do you think about those, Ellen?
Well, Mindy's right. There are times for all 3 faces, and that was really the point of the series, was that your spiritual life is greatly enriched if you can find a way to use all 3 faces. But I am right where Sarah was and is. She's our friend from California, longtime listener. And when she says, "I've been working so hard not to pray to God because God is not outside of me, and now you're telling me to have a relationship with God, and so what am I supposed to do?"
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a wonderful book that came out last year about it's called How to Pray Without Talking to God. And it's written by Unity minister Linda Martella Whitsitt, who is at Unity of San Antonio, down the road from me. And she did a beautiful job of praying from the I am, from the God within. And Unity does emphasize that these days, which is why it was interesting to talk to Mark about the language the founders used, because they had no problem with God as Father and, dear God in heaven and that kind of thing. I am frankly still working through it for myself. Karen, you have an easier time with this.
Well, I happen to really like the second face of God. And as a matter of fact, I think once again, all of the 3 faces, the important thing is that we try them out and we see what works for us, because it's about the experience and it's about how it makes us feel and how it makes us show up in our life and how we are growing on our spiritual path. And basically, if the shoe fits, wear it. I mean, if speaking, to the second face works for you and it brings you peace and it brings you comfort and you can see the second face of God as other people, you can see God in the other faces of people and you act out compassionately, why the heck not? You know?
Yeah, and Sarah, directly to your point, probably the best answer I got for that was from Kelly Isola in show number 3. And she reminded me, God is in other people too. God is in the animals. It's whenever we're having a relationship with anything in the physical world, we are also having a relationship with God. And that was really helpful. So I don't have to picture God sitting out in heaven watching me like I did when I was a child in order to have a second face experience.
Right.
Yeah.
You've got a couple letters there, don't you, Ellen?
I do. I have one from Joe, who is not the same as Joe Lou. Joe says, I've had so much confusion about how to pray and meditate because I've been stuck with the idea that I am God, and knowing I am, has nothing to do with my ego. And then Alan wrote us a lot, but I think this is the nut of what he was asking.
Right.
He says, when I attended Unity Metaphysics classes, and he's a licensed teacher, we focused on the language of oneness, that God is all that is. We learned that our language ought not to include wording that stems from our embedded theology of God in relationship to us, which we were told supports the idea of God as other, as separate, and it undermines the notion of the oneness of unity. And he says many students found this teaching to be distressing. Because for anyone who is comfortable with a second face relationship, that teaching that, oh, well, that's just your embedded theology and you need to learn the language of oneness, can feel like it just strips them of the God that they know.
Yes. Well, great comments from you, Ellen, and good letters and questions. And I'm going to take a shot at answering this one because this is the one that is really a big deal for me. So first, let's remember, once again, that the three faces that Wilber observed in the great world religions are really structured to describe and experience the divine, and they reflect the exact same ways that you and I relate to ourselves and each other in our lives. The first person, Ellen, your mom was the English teacher. The first person, I is about I. Second person,
you.
The relationship. And third person, he, she, or it, right?
He, she, or it, yes, the other.
The other something. So, yeah. So Wilber concluded that he saw evidence that all the faces, in fact, are true, but that no one face holds all the truth. So, going to what Alan said, it seems to me that if our embedded theology taught us to approach God in only the second face, or if our new embedded theology teaches us to approach and experience God only in the first phase, well, in either case, we're still not embracing all the ways to experience and appreciate the divine, are we? We've shifted from one to the other. And you may recall that Paul Smith in our second show, once again, said that Jesus not only demonstrated and experienced all three faces, but he told us that we can too. So why not try them out ourselves? We can engage in practices of various ways to experience the divine in all three faces and not just talk about the divine. So here's what I'm going to say. If you pray to God for help, or you say thanks, or you contemplate your relationship with the divine, or you see the face of God in other people, this is all the second face. And if it works for you, do it. If you engage in deep meditative practice and experience your oneness with the divine in the first phase, well, if you've experienced that, you will know it to be true, and no one will ever be able to stop you from doing more of it. And I guess lastly, if you sense and appreciate the divine intelligence at work in nature, or look at the vastness of the universe, all of the attributes of the third phase, well, I just say enjoy lots more of it. Who is going to stop you? Because if your spiritual practices work for you and enrich your life, who in the heck has the right to try to convince you that they aren't the right practices for you?
Yeah, and I can tell you I've had no luck convincing my congregants that they should look at God in one way or the other. And one time when I was on my soapbox about God is not an old man in the sky, I got a note from one of the congregants, and it was a nice note. But he said, you've also told us that God is all there is, that there is nothing God not. So you can't even say God's not an old man in the sky if God is all there is.
Ooh, I wish I was there for that one.
Got me. Hey, Karen, we're out of time again. We always run out of time while we're talking.
I know.
But this, please go to our Facebook page. It's going to stay live even after this series ends, The Three Faces of God. And join us next Monday when we talk to Dustin DePerna, because it was so much fun, and you will love hearing that recording. Karen, have a wonderful week, and we'll be back with The Three Faces on next Monday. Thanks very much.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to The Three Faces of God with Karen Kelly and Reverend Ellen Davenport. This is a 6-week special series about understanding the divine in different ways. This program is brought to you in part by EllenDavenport.com and by Unity of Wimberley, Texas, online at unityofwimberley.com.
If I were brave, I'd walk the razor's edge, where fools and dreamers dare to tread, and never lose faith.
How is life working for you? Would it be okay with you if life got easier, simpler, yet more meaningful and vibrant? Join certified life coach Carla McClellan Tuesday afternoons for Vibrant Living. Each week, Coach Carla and her guests will share strategies and solutions designed to make your life more vibrant. Is there something in your life you'd like help with? A dream you'd like to achieve? A relationship you'd like to improve? Call into the show toll-free for Coaching with Carla. That's Vibrant Living, Life Coaching with Carla. Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Central on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
What if we're all meant to do what we secretly dream?
According to an ancient Hindu teaching, if you can only speak the truth and tell no lies for 12 consecutive years, you can attain enlightenment. Resolve to be honest with yourself and others starting today. And after 4,383 days, you just may become enlightened.
This meditative moment from Reverend Joan Gattuso and Unity Magazine is brought to you by Unity.
Oprah Winfrey says that Eric Butterworth's book, Discover the Power Within You, changed her perspective on life and religion. Maya Angelou quotes Emily Cady's Lessons in Truth as she recalls her own spiritual awakening. What do these books have in common? They share Unity's classic teachings. Join Reverend Laura Beth Gilbreth, Minister of Unity Transformation, Thursdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, for Hooked on Classics, exploring Unity's classic teachings. Follow along and contribute your thoughts, questions, and ideas as we examine these foundational teachings through the works of Unity authors past and present. Hooked on Classics, exploring Unity's classic teachings, only on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
Is there a difference between the spiritual teachings you know and how you live your life? Does your day-to-day experience reflect what you truly value? Are you ready to receive your life and live the gift that you are? Join Janice Campbell, licensed Unity teacher, author, and coach, each week as she shares inspiration and tools to help you identify and dissolve the limiting beliefs that prevent you from living the fullest expression of what you are. Talk with Janice live every Thursday at 9 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Central on Receive Your Life, only on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
What if you were intentional about your life, committed to having more energy and being more vibrant? Join Reverend Temple Hayes, spiritual leader of First Unity at Unity Campus in St. Petersburg, Florida, as she guides you on a journey to an intentional and energetic life. Empower your life and fully express the wondrous energy, love, and joy you hold in your wildest imagining. Joyfully and actively know that more important than what happens after you die is the deeper and enriching concern for what happens while you're living. How can you experience an incredible life right now? Learn how each week on The Intentional Spirit, Seeing and Being, Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Central Time, right here on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
Spirit of Recovery is the place where spirituality and recovery meet, where we support your spiritual growth. Reverend Anna Schaus, Ph.D., interviews down-to-earth guests who share with you how they keep going and growing in recovery. Spirit of Recovery is the place to get practical tips and join in lively discussions on topics that matter to recovering people. This program welcomes everyone who wants to know more about recovery. Join Anna and her guests live every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Central Time on Spirit of Recovery, where we talk about what keeps you growing. Only on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
Does music open your heart and bring you peace and joy? Experience the sacredness of sound with Ramdesh Kaur as we travel the world of mantra, Kundalini Yoga, and devotional music. Join us for a journey into spirit, Thursdays at 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern on Spirit Voyage Radio with Ramdesh. Only on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
Is there a difference between the spiritual teachings you know and how you live your life? Does your day-to-day experience reflect what you truly value? Are you ready to receive your life and live the gift that you are? Join Janice Campbell, licensed Unity teacher, author, and coach, each week as she shares inspiration and tools to help you identify and dissolve the limiting beliefs that prevent you from living the fullest expression of what you are. Talk with Janice live every Thursday at 9 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Central on Receive Your Life, only on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
At the base of all life is the infinite wellspring of Source, and each of us has a unique way of expressing that Source as an individualized soul. Do you enjoy the company of inspiring people who are living on purpose? Do you want to live joyfully attuned to your own unique soul expression? Host Reverend Kristen Powell welcomes you to join the gathering of souls who live this way. You'll meet artists, naturalists, and other soulful expressions that will inspire you to call forth the most alive, passionate version of yourself. Get into the natural stream of your own soul by tuning into Soulstream live every Wednesday at noon Central Time on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.